All right, appreciate you finding us on the Powers on Sports podcast. Really hope everybody is having a great Memorial Day weekend, and we are going to talk to a legendary voice in the National Basketball Association. Bob Rathbun has been covering the Atlanta Hawks since 1996. He's been the voice of the Hawks for year 28 up going into year 28. Bob's also got a storied career covering Major League Baseball. Has done some work with the Braves and the Tigers over the years, covered the SEC, the ACC. Just a well-versed figure in the world of sports media, and we are very pleased to have Mr. Bob Rathbun join the podcast. Appreciate you doing this, Bob.
Jason, it's my pleasure. Good morning to you.
Hope you're having a great Memorial Day weekend. For those of you out there, we are recording this Memorial Day weekend, and Bob, we saw a finish for the ages on Saturday night in Miami. The Boston Celtics have taken this series from where we down 3-0, and they are on the brink of making some NBA history here, forcing a Game 7 Memorial Day night in Boston.
Pretty incredible finish. If you had a chance to see it or listen to it, it looked like the Celtics were dead in the water, and then all of a sudden, out of nowhere, it seemed, Derek White came in and tipped that missed shot in at the buzzer, and the Celtics sent it to a Game 7. But it's very interesting how the national narrative really forms people's opinions rather than just watching the game for yourself and figuring out your own perspective. You know, excuse me, you can edit that out. It's interesting to me, Jason, that the feeling on Sunday morning was, well, Miami's dead. Boston's going to win Game 7 by 50, the way they survived, blah, blah, blah.
Right.
And I am here to tell you, after being in this league for 30 years, the players don't think that way.
Right.
They just don't. If they did, they wouldn't be the NBA players that they are. You don't think these guys have ever lost a heartbreaker at the buzzer in their lives? Do you think that's the extent of their competitive nature? Oh, well, we're going back to Boston. We don't have a chance. No. I'm here to tell you, this is my prediction. I don't know who's going to win, but I think it's going to be just like Game 6. I think it's going to go right down to the wire, unless somebody has just a god-awful shooting night that we don't anticipate.
Right.
I just you got a chance to go to the NBA Finals. You know, this may never happen again in your life. You don't know. I think it's going to be great. It is fantastic basketball theater. That I do know.
And if you don't know, folks, nobody in the NBA has ever come back from down 0-3. I can make the argument all the pressure's back on Boston now. They've got Game 7 in their building. If they don't climb the mountain, I won't say it's not for waste, but to me, all the pressure's back on Boston. You've gotten to this point. The game's in your building. They've struggled in their building in this postseason. Your Hawks, you played these guys in round 1, correct? Yep. So you know this Boston team. To me, all the pressure's back on Boston now.
I think it's, yes, because they're expected to win, but I think there's a lot on Miami too. I mean,
right.
If I'm Eric Spoelstra, no matter what the score is at halftime, I say to those guys, listen, if we lose this game and lose this series, this is going to be on you for the rest of your life. If that isn't pressure, if that isn't motivation, true. I don't know what is. One quick footnote, and I'm sorry I don't have it right here in front of me, but there was one playoff series in the NBA back in, I want to say, the 50s, where a team was down 0-3, came back tied at 3-3, and had the lead with a minute. This is one of those like Syracuse, Rochester.
All right.
And they lost the game in like the last minute. So it's not like, the history of basketball that somebody hasn't been right there to do this, but it is unusual. You just figure that with so many chances, 4 games, and the teams are not talent-wise, they're not equal, but generally speaking, in the NBA, the talent's pretty even. And you'd think that somebody would pull it out over the years, but it's never been done, and that's going to be the whole storyline going into Monday.
All right, so let's move forward a few days. Obviously, the NBA Finals will start later in the week here. Denver's waiting for the winner of either Miami or Boston. Give me your sense. You've been around, like, obviously the Eastern teams more than Denver, but just give me a sense. Everybody thinks Denver's finally gotten over the hump now with beating the Lakers the way they did in the history. They've had a lot of time off. How do you see whoever wins coming out of the East faring against the Denver Nuggets?
Well, the interesting part about this is if Boston wins Game 7, the series opens in Boston. If Miami wins, they open in Denver. And I think that's huge.
I do too.
Because Denver has been a tremendous team at home. They haven't lost a home playoff game, if I'm not mistaken.
Right.
And it's hard to beat those dudes at altitude. I'm telling you. Even though the players are superbly conditioned, it does take a while to get used to that. And I think that's a huge advantage for Denver, as it is for Utah back in the day when they were really good. It's just hard to play those guys up in the mountains. That said, I do think Denver is as overlooked and undersold as any team we've had in a long, long time. Again, we get back to the national media and the way they form opinions for the fans. This is. I think you could say Denver's the best team in our league. Now, I know Boston's got a better record, but again, you're dealing with, the two coasts that dominate the media. And of course, the Boston media they're the biggest cheerleaders the Celtics have ever had, never will have. So you're getting this from not a basketball perspective, but from a cheerleader perspective. They want to win so they can wave their pom-poms and look down their nose at you and, we're better than you. We're smarter than you. We invented basketball. You didn't. So if you can stomach that for the next couple of weeks, I think we'll see a very good series between, we'll take Boston and Miami and Denver first. The Celtics weaponry is pretty significant. This is when they're a one-trick pony, but when they're hitting their threes, they are very hard to defeat. However, I think Denver is a little undersold because this Jokic has been just a miracle man. Jamal Murray is back healthy again.
Very balanced scoring.
They are. And they get just enough from everybody else. Gordon is going to be a good defensive matchup for Brown. And
Porter is a tough matchup.
Yep, exactly. So I think that series could really be intriguing. If they play Miami, unless I miss something, I just think Denver will crush them because Miami is going to be gassed.
Right.
I mean, to have to go 7 and win in Boston and then turn right around and fly to Denver for Game 1 on the 1st of June is a little too much to ask for any team, much less one that is down personnel like Miami is,
right?
With their injured, no Oladipo, no Hero, and they've kind of gotten used to playing with them. But you can see how they struggle when things aren't going their way with Butler. I mean, Jimmy last night, my goodness, coming down the stretch in the fourth quarter, it was amazing. What was he, 5 for 21 at one point?
Yeah, right.
I mean, struggle city. So I think Denver would have its way with Miami, not so with Boston.
Talk about the evolution of the NBA game the last 10 years or so in the kind of the Steph Curry era. Denver's kind of more your traditional low post team. They move the ball, not as relying on the three. Just talk about how you see the NBA change over the last. So many more teams are just so reliant on the 3-point shot, and that's become so many more possessions. I mean, the thought of games getting to 125, 130 on a consistent basis 15 years ago was unheard of. And from a broadcasting perspective, less time to fill. There's just so much up and down. Just talk about how that, from your perspective, how that's changed so much in the NBA.
Yeah, we've seen quite a change when you go back to, say the 80s when physical play was the number one concern. You had to make a business decision when you drove down the lane.
Yeah.
Were you going to get killed or not? And that sort of gave way as they changed, took hand checking out, and tweaked the rules of the game to allow the offense to really play some beautiful basketball. We saw it with San Antonio. They were sort of the creators of this spread the floor, move the ball, shoot threes, etc. And then, of course, you've got the advent of Steph Curry that you mentioned. And that completely changed the way teams look at the game, play the game,
scout it.
Scouting the game. The value of the three-point shot has been overwhelming, to the point where I must say I think it's going overboard. I think the fact that you can't touch anybody, that everybody's going to shoot 53s a night, it reminded me of when the designated hitter came to baseball. It's just too much. We've lost the balance in the game. Nobody is taking twos to speak of. A long two, they look down at you if you take a long two. Like, if the ball goes in, what difference does it make? But right. I just think that you'll see, and the competition committee has already met this spring, and they will meet again this summer to look and see what can we allow so we can still have the offense that the fans love, but how can we give the defense a bit of a chance to rein these guys in just a little bit, to recap, have the pendulum swing back a little bit, so you got that balance between offense and defense.
All right, one more current basketball question, and then we'll move on we'll get a little bit into Bob's career and he's done many, many things outside of broadcasting that I want to get into as well. Talk about the Hawks a little bit. Obviously, the team you cover. A lot of speculation and chatter. There might be some changes this offseason in Atlanta. Trae Young potentially. We don't know, but just talk about the state of the Atlanta Hawks and kind of you covering that team and Trae Young. And, obviously they lost to Boston in round one. People don't remember. They went down and smoked Miami in the play-in game. Right. I mean, before this playoff run even started, they went down and manhandled the Heat in the first play-in game. Just give a little review of the Hawks season and kind of where they're going.
Well, it was a very trying season, to say the least. We were a 500 ball club that achieved its stated goal of making the playoffs, but the way they did it was as unconventional as you could get, because we changed general managers halfway through the season. And then with 20 games to go, we changed coaches. And unheard of in the NBA that a team would change coaches in a season that late that's still trying to make the playoffs.
Right. And made it.
Yeah, and ended up going down and winning that game in Miami to earn the 7th seed, which is crazy. And really played Boston fairly well after the first two. And I thought if we had played the first 2 games of that series like we played the last 2 games of that series, it might have been a different outcome. We may have taken that thing to 7. So we were right there with them in game 6 at home, and then went cold the last 5 minutes, and Boston ended up winning the game. But my point is, Quinn is going to do a wonderful job. Quinn Snyder took over as our new coach, and he's putting his staff together as we speak. And I thought, it was a little tough spot to drop him into, because he didn't know any of his coaches. He didn't know any of his players, and he coached the team like 24 hours after accepting the job, which is kind of crazy. But it did give him a chance to go through the wins, the losses, the locker room, the travel, and build relationships. So as they meet this summer, they can ask Quinn, well, what do you think? You've seen us now. You've been in that locker room. You've had him on the practice court. What about player A, B, C, D, E? I don't know that they've ultimately had those conversations yet. They're coming because the draft is right around the corner. But I just don't think they can run it back, Jason. I just don't. This is a kind of a 500 ball club. The DeJounte Murray experiment.
Right.
Lukewarm, I think, at best. Both players' numbers, Trae and DeJounte, their numbers went down from the year before. Of course, Murray was with San Antonio. And both were, have been all-stars, but it just didn't seem to click like they had hoped.
Right.
Not that anybody did anything wrong. It's just you got 2 ball-dominant guys on the court, and neither can play the 2-guard position effectively. So I think that has to be addressed. Murray's in a contract year, so that's a factor. John Collins had a very disappointing season. Rebounded a bit late with the 3-ball, but overall had his worst career year shooting the 3. Is he going to be traded, or is he not? Again, these are kind of the questions that they've got to decide, Landry Fields, the new GM, and Kyle Korver, our assistant GM, and Quinn, just got to put their heads together. And then if you do decide to make changes, well, who are you going to get? And is it better than what you have? And do you've kind of depleted your draft capital to get Murray. So that's kind of got to be in the back of your mind too. So I think they've got a lot of questions to answer. And as we say in the TV business, stay tuned.
All right, we listen to Bob Rathbun, play-by-play voice of the Atlanta Hawks for Bally Sports. Long-time, super successful broadcasting career throughout different sports. Again, SEC, ACC, Major League Baseball, the NBA for many, many years. Worked with a lot of great analysts over the years. Dominique, Grant Hill, Steve Smith, all those guys. Just talk about working with these different Hall of Fame kind of guys, these legendary figures, especially in the NBA, the Dominiques of the world, the Steve Smiths of the world. Just talk about the dynamic of getting to know these guys on a day-to-day level, working, traveling, doing an NBA year with these different guys that you've worked with.
Well, what's unique about it is they all played for us. So I had a relationship with them prior to the broadcast booth. Smitty was one of my favorite Hawks when he was with us. And of course, I broadcast games that Nick played in from his high school days to college to the pros. And now he sits next to me every night. Probably the most fun part about it is the stories that they tell. They've seen it all, done it all in their careers. They've been on teams that have made. Well, Smitty was on a world championship team in San Antonio, and Neek in the glory days here in Atlanta back in the '80s. So the stories are fantastic, and that I really do enjoy. But I think working with them from a broadcasting standpoint is the challenge to draw out of them that knowledge.
Right.
Okay, you saw this happen before. What can you tell the fans is going through their minds? Because they've been there, they've done that. And I think that gives the fans a very unique perspective on the game. But it's so much fun to be with these guys and travel with them and hang out with them. And it's one of the perks of the job, if you will.
Give the fans a perspective of a guy that kind of follows the same team for a year. I mean, you're with the Hawks virtually all year long. Just give the fans a sense of the grind of the travel. I mean, you might be on a 5-game road trip from Sacramento to Portland to Minnesota in a 7 or 8 day period. Just the rigors of doing that on a day-to-day basis as the play-by-play guy.
Well, I will answer it one of two ways. Is it a grind? Absolutely. When you're based in the East and you're traveling West, the time changes and the lack of sleep. Yeah. But let's get serious here. I drive to the airport. I park in front of the private aviation terminal. There are two nice young men from Delta Airlines who open the trunk of my car, take my luggage out, put it on a cart. I go park my car. I walk in. We have our security check, and I walk
100 feet,
100 yards, maybe, max, depending on where they park the charter, to get to the steps to go to a first-class seat on a 757 charter. This is tough. I know this is very, very tough.
And you ain't staying at the Days Inn either when you arrive wherever you're going.
When we land, we don't go through the terminal. We go down those steps and walk 30 feet to get on a bus that takes us to the hotel, which is 5 stars is a minimum as we travel around the league.
Yep.
I don't have to check in. There's an envelope waiting for me at a desk with my name on it. There's my room. I got my key. And then I go up, and a few minutes later, another nice young bellman comes up to my room with my luggage. Guys, that's not travel. It's not.
Yep.
It's just not.
Yep.
I mean, I do college games. I have to go to the airport and grind it just like any businessman or woman. And it's tough. And what we do is not travel. So I must say, yeah, it's a lot because we're gone so much from our homes and our families. You miss a lot of things, to be sure. And I don't mean to discount that. But the way we travel is not difficult. And I don't want to give the appearance that it is. Now, does getting home at 2 and 3 in the morning grind
Right.
on you? Yeah, it does. But that's also part of the deal.
Right.
We sign up for this. Those of us who've been doing it a while know how to navigate it. So it's not nearly as taxing as it used to be in the old days, particularly when we were flying commercial. But it's Jason, come on, it's not that hard.
Is there a routine thing that you like to do when you do get in that mode, when you are tired, to kind of get you out of that mode? Whether it's, I don't know, go for a swim or go play around the golf somewhere,
I
something to
always
get
get
out of
some
the
exercise in for sure. But I think one of the big things is I know what I need to do to get ready for the broadcast, and there's so much downtime that you can get it done.
Yeah.
Rarely, well, never really do we fly and play the same day unless
Right.
there's some kind of travel emergency. So we've got the night in the city to take it easy and do what you want to do. Go get a bite to eat or whatever, go to a movie or whatever, and come back and grind. So that part of it I've figured out over the years. The big thing is, and I'm sure you deal with this too in your day to day, is the information age is both a blessing and a curse.
Right.
It's a blessing because everything's at your fingertips. It's a curse because you can't possibly go through it all. And in the NBA, I'm sitting here looking at the screen on my desk, and I've got
every stat, every kind of stat,
video just from last night.
Yeah.
So I've got at my fingertips, I've got everything that happened in pro basketball last night, from WNBA to NBA to Denver Pressers to it's right there. And you can't possibly go through it all. So you learn how to pick and choose what you need. And, the clippings that come in and all the wire stuff and all the online stuff. You just kind of have to weed through to get what you need.
How did Bob Rathbun get into sports broadcasting long time ago? What was his desire as a kid, or what at whatever point in your life you realized this is what I'd like to do for a living?
I was 12 years old, growing up in Salisbury, North Carolina. And I don't know what caused me to do it. I don't think my parents said anything. But one Sunday afternoon, I picked up the phone and I called our radio station in town. And, it's a small town, Salisbury, North Carolina. We had two stations, and this one had more sports, so that's the one I listened to. And I called the station. There's one announcer on duty on a Sunday. And he answered the phone, and I introduced myself and told him how much I enjoyed the sports. And he said, well, why don't you come on down? We'll give you a tour of the radio station. So my mom and dad took me down. And the second I walked in, I knew this is it. I love this. This is the greatest thing I've ever seen. And it became an every Sunday ritual where I would just go hang out at the station. And, I'm a 12-year-old kid. So I took out the garbage and, cleared the wire, for those of you who might know what that means.
Right.
And, filed records and did all the stuff, get the announcer something to drink and stuff like that. One day the sportscaster of the station shows up to check the scores. And he said, well, if you like sports and radio, come help us work on these baseball broadcasts. And we had an American Legion team in our town that to this day is still outstanding, state championship team. And the whole county formed the team. So all the 5 high schools are involved, and it just became the thing to do in the summertime. We didn't have minor league baseball anymore. And so we broadcast the games because the games were sold out. And they played it ultimately the school where I went, Catawba College, and I'm going, keeping stats and getting the guy a hot dog. And he says one night, are you ready to make your debut? Said, well, I guess. And so I got the mic in the bottom of the 7th inning of this game. And these are high school kids, playing summer ball, Legion ball. And our first baseman turned on one, hit a home run, and I got to call it. I don't remember what I said, but the announcer on the play-by-play guy got the mic back in the top of the 8th inning. And he said, ladies and gentlemen, I have been waiting all season to call a home run. And when we hit one, I've got a 12-year-old kid on the mic. And that announcer was Marty Brennaman, the Hall of Fame voice of the Cincinnati Reds.
That's awesome.
Since retired. And he was just starting his career in Salisbury, doing all the games, and I kept stats for him. And that town, Jason, was the home at the time of the National Sportscasters and Sports Writers Association, where they honor the
Wow.
sportscasters in every state and
Yeah.
writers, national winners. And when I got to be 16, I got my driver's license and I was on the transportation committee, which meant drive to Charlotte Airport and pick these guys up and bring them back. So I had all the greats in my back seat,
That's
not
awesome.
only casters but writers, and they were so accommodating. I told them all that this is what I wanted to do, and they shared and were great mentors through the years. And I wrote for the paper. I worked at the radio station. So I had a charmed life growing up and loved every second of it. And by the time I was a sophomore at Catawba, I was on the air full time and went to school full time, got a speech degree, and I have been doing it ever since.
That's a great story with Marty Brenneman and American Legion baseball on a Sunday. That's great.
Yeah. Rowan County.
That's awesome. That's great.
One of
the nuggets I saw that was so cool too, kind of hit my heart because I was always a big fan of this. You and Lee Corso did the first Arena Bowl.
Oh my God!
Back in 1987, and where I'm at here in Tampa, the Tampa Bay Storm were a major player in the Arena League. Talk about the Arena League and just what a great league that was for such a long time.
Well, it wasn't in 87, I can tell you. There was a guy named Jim Foster. I don't know if you know that name, but he was based in Iowa. And he had this crazy idea, the old typical draw it up on a napkin.
Yep.
And thought he could pull it off and owned the entire league. Okay. In 87, there were 5 teams in their first year, and the league owned all 5. And they paid all the players, and there was not an independent franchise. They had one carpet that they trucked from arena to arena. And so the schedule is all spread out, so they could get the turf
right
into the arena. So I got a call and said, how would you like to do arena football? I said, yeah, I'll give it a shot. And my producer was a gentleman named Will Belkey, who was a sports producer for many, many years. And they got Lee to do the color. And so I'm investigating the league, thinking there'll be a media guide, a rule book. Nothing. And when I say nothing, I mean nothing. They're writing the rule book by hand, practically. So I caught wind of, do you know Mouse Davis?
Yes. Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
Okay. Well, Mouse is in charge of player personnel. So I called him and I said, Mouse, what in the world is going on? I said, well, listen, we got a preseason game to try all this out in Rockford, Illinois. Why don't you come? And so Lee and Will and I go to Rockford because I called Will and I said, they got to pay for this, the flights and everything. I said, we have got to go and get a handle on this. And so we go to Rockford and we watch this scrimmage. And they're like tweaking the rules as they play. We didn't broadcast that game. We just watched. We're in the stands watching. So we get to Chicago to do the opening night. ESPN, remember now, this is 1987. They didn't have Major League Baseball.
Yep.
They didn't have the NFL. They're still dependent on college basketball and Australian rules football and all that to get through. But still, they had SportsCenter. And SportsCenter ran at 11 o'clock, come hell or high water. And we are on a Saturday night, and they budgeted us from 9 to 11 to play this game. You figure, come on, 2 hours indoor football, 3.5 hours. A game goes to overtime. They are dying in Bristol.
Get off the air now.
Get off the air. They are screaming at us, and I'm looking at Corso, and I said, this is the last game we will ever broadcast on ESPN. They fire our butts as soon as we get off the air.
And it's not your fault.
No. But the game, they tried for overtime. They tried sort of an amalgamation between the NFL and college, where the other team would get the ball. It's really screwy, really screwy. And even if they tied after each team touched it, you still went back and forth. It was messed up. So we think we got it all covered, right? So the Denver Dynamite, Tim Markham,
Yes.
right? So Timmy wins the game, and we get a mic on him at the end. And we say, Tim, you've won the first game in arena football history on ESPN. How's it feel? He said, well, Bob and Lee, I think Chicago gets the ball back. I'm not sure.
The game's not over.
This is our first game.
Oh, my gosh.
But Corso had the best line. I don't know how he came by. It was fabulous. Now, this is the first game. Chicago, who the backup quarterback was Sean Payton.
Wow.
Okay. I think Mike Hohensie was the quarterback, and he throws this bomb, and a bomb being 50 yards. And this guy, I don't remember the receiver, but he stretches out and makes one of those great catches. And, it's like playing on concrete.
Yeah.
And he makes the catch, and that's the first touchdown. And Corso says, ladies and gentlemen, that is the greatest catch in the history of arena football. It's like the third play of the game.
That's great.
It was something else. It was something else.
Give me one or two events that you'd love to cover that you've never covered.
Ooh. NFL.
Okay.
Preseason game would be fine. Obviously we'd all love to do, an NBA Finals game or some World Series or something like that. I always wanted to do a bowl game, a college football bowl game, but I've never had the chance. Mainly, conflicts,
right,
with hoops. I'd like to not broadcast, but I'd just like to go to the Kentucky Derby once, and I'd like to go to the Indianapolis 500 once. Just to
which is this weekend.
I know.
That's this weekend.
Just to see the spectacle.
Neat.
Because we go to Indy all the time,
right?
And we've heard so much about it and have met so many people. I remember we met Danica Patrick in a restaurant. It may have been St. Elmo's, I'm not sure.
Yeah.
But I remember I shook her hand. She about broke my hand. This is when she was driving.
Right.
And I said, the hands on this woman to control that race car. I mean, it was like, Artis Gilmore's, the basketball player, has the hardest handshake in the history of humankind. But I'm telling you, old Danica, man, she could shake a man's hand and about break your hand. She was delightful too, by the way. And then we go to Louisville all the time for college football and basketball.
Right.
And so I go by Churchill Downs, and one time, and I used to do the SEC with Tim Couch.
Yep.
And I told Tim, I said, man, I just want to, he said, you just tell me. But every year, we're playing or we're in the playoffs. So, but I'll make it.
Yeah. Last couple minutes with Bob Rathbun. You can go to bobrathbun.com. He's got a great website. He is an author. He's got a online Rathbun Round Ball report. I want you to give the audience a little sense of what drove you to kind of write a book about. It's called Fast Forward Winner. Talk about the what Oedipus of why you decided to write a book.
Sure. Well, I've had so many young people ask me, I want to do what you do. How do I get started? And I said, well, you know what? Let me just put it in a book. And it's more of a workbook than it is a book.
Yep.
Where you just go through 6 steps to figure out what you're good at, what you can make money at, and what you love doing. And the intersection of all 3 is something you need to explore.
Yep.
And it's nothing more, Jason, than my story. How it happened for me with luck and timing and right place at right time. And I use that as sort of a textbook, if you will, when I go to speak to high schools and colleges and career days and stuff like that, just to give young people some structure as to how to do this. Because there's one thing we've lost in our country, and I think across a lot of jobs, is the role of the apprentice, where you just don't step in and work Sports Center or do play-by-play and go to the Super Bowl. Right. It takes years and years. And I remember Jack Buck, Joe's dad, when he was in St. Louis doing the Cardinals, and Joe said, I want to go do baseball too. And Jack said, great, go to Louisville and do the AAA games for 10 years and call me. and Joe went down and did Louisville. And it didn't take him 10 years,
I was going to
obviously.
say, not quite 10 years for Joe.
But my point is,
I know, right.
The old school way of doing it, I spent 8 years doing minor league baseball.
Yep.
I had no problem with that. And it just, be an apprentice, learn your craft, work on your trade. And because then when you get there, you stay there.
No doubt, no doubt. Like I said, Bob does a ton of work in the Atlanta area. He's a fixture in the Atlanta market. And again, it's been a real pleasure, Bob, talking to you about your journey. Again, play-by-play voice of the Atlanta Hawks, Bally Sports. Again, he's done it all from arena football with Lee Corso in Rockford, Illinois, all the way to the Sunday afternoon American Legion game at your favorite high school or college in your little town. So, been a real pleasure, Bob. I really appreciate the time. Enjoy the rest of your weekend, Memorial Day weekend, and we'll hopefully have a great NBA Finals, and look forward to hearing you on the air next year for the Atlanta Hawks as well.
Well, thank you, sir. I really appreciate it, and shout out to your audience. And if there are aspiring broadcasters that are listening to this, by all means, reach out. You can go through the website at bobrathbun.com. Reach out to me. I'd be happy to talk to you. Those mentors I talked about that I had when I was a kid, I want to pay it forward if I can, because they were so nice to me.
You got it. Well, have a great weekend, Bob. I really appreciate it. And we will be.
You got it, buddy.
Yep. Thanks. And appreciate you finding us on the Powers on Sports podcast. Have a great week, folks. Stay safe. If you haven't already done so, thank somebody who served this country. It's Memorial Day weekend for a lot of tough weekend for a lot of people around the country to give us all the freedom that we love to have. So have a great weekend, and we'll see you next time on the Powers on Sports podcast.